I'm Dr. Stan Steindl. Welcome back for part 2 of Compassion in a T-shirt, in session with Deirdre Fay. Deirdre is the author of Becoming Safely Embodied, a guide to organise your mind, body and heart to feel secure in the world. In part 2 of my conversation with Deirdre, she'll be describing in a bit more detail the 9 skills of becoming safely embodied: belonging, meditation, internal information flow, separating facts from feelings, addressing parallel lives, working with parts, carving out a new path, telling and retelling, finding guidance from your older, wiser self. I do hope you enjoy being in session for part 2 with my friend Deirdre Fay. Having read your wonderful book, and I think it's the 9 skills of becoming safely embodied. It begins with belonging and trying to cultivate a sense of belonging or reflect back on experiences of belonging. Can you tell us a bit more about that piece that came as the first skill in the book, I suppose? I'm not sure whether that's where one might begin normally, but tell us a bit about that one.
Well, if I think about it, and this is, Paul Gilbert also helped me sort this out as well. In CFT, we talk about safety and safeness. And it's in reading and deliberating on the attachment work is that foundational bed of belonging, of being part of a tribe, is what creates safety. So can I feel safe physically? That's essential. But can I also feel safe psychologically and emotionally? And for many people, that's not the case. So how do I do that? And most of the ways we do that is through community and connection and tribalism. And with David White, the great poet, helped me with this as well. When I was assisting him on a workshop many years ago, and he was asking me about the work that I was doing. And he had talked in the workshop about belongingness. And I said, well, a lot of the people I work with don't belong anywhere. And he said, well, they do. They might belong to the hospital or to their sense of something's wrong with me, or I've done something wrong, or I'm, and so we belong to the negative. We belong to what's wrong and not to everything else. So I started with the skills. The first couple sessions of a group when I would lead it is show us where you belong, bring us items. So people would bring things like this one, I'll never forget. One woman brought some rosemary and she had us all smell the rosemary. And then she told us a story of how her grandmother in Italy would have these rosemary bushes, and the smell reminded her of that safety and connection. So when people start feeling safe and they reconnect to what's safe, now they can be the internal boundaries soften, and you can have more access to yourself. So then I've also been reflecting on the work of the threat system, and how do we make the threat system so small that we don't activate threat? If we make change so small, then it's not going to activate the threat system. And so how do we do that? And I started working with this idea of making something so granular so that the fears, blocks, and resistance aren't activated, so that I can let something rise, crest, and fall and have a success. So if I need to belong to somebody, so I'm thinking of a client that I had who was highly, highly dissociated, and her terror was of men, and that all men were bad and were rapists and perpetrators. And so we worked with that, and we started looking, well, what's a granular way? Are all men bad? She liked Obama. So we would say, when you look at Obama, is he a perpetrator? Do you think he abuses his daughters? And it was that, so that's a cognitive way of interacting, but it's becomes so small that then she was able to start looking around at the men in her life or people she interacted with and seeing, making those small granular distinctions. And what's that feel like in your body? So when you look at Obama and you feel like, oh, he's a good man, what does good man feel like in here? Mm. So that's taking belongingness and making it more granular. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's scaffolding it in small ways.
So belonging is a little bit about safeness and a sense of safeness, recognizing that can be hard to access for people. And so being able to break it down and just sort of rebuild it up a little bit, bit by bit, in that kind of granular way. That's even the one skill of belonging is kind of scaffolded too. And
yes, absolutely.
And in fact,
everything is.
Yes, and that's the sort of becoming safely embodied is a lot about sort of just the graduating of things, this little step by step, sort of moving in a direction, not doing it all at once, but trying to just create that scaffolding that possibly the person might have missed out on in the flow of their life till this point.
Well, and if we think about it, it's in every task that we do. If I had to learn computer programming, I'd have to sit and learn the language and break it down into small bits. And so that's part of the process of scaffolding that. So how do I do that in terms of my psychological self, my emotional self? If I'm doing that in terms of meditation and developing myself as a compassionate being, how do I break it down into small ways so that I can actually take the next step? And
that's the second skill, is meditation. You did mention mindfulness and concentration, and that was a useful kind of delineation. You know, mindfulness might be I am being triggered, and concentration might be, so what direction would I like to take from here? You mentioned something like that, but yeah, tell us a bit more about the meditation skill in terms of becoming safely embodied.
Well, it's really that. It's becoming aware of what the perceptual lens out of which I'm looking through my life now. So Bowlby, the great attachment theorist, talked about the internal working model, and the internal working model on a embodied level is basically, it's like a contact lens that I look through my life with and experience life. So if I grew up, we talk about it in compassion focused therapy, if I grew up in a certain environment, that is going to shape everything that I do. It's going to shape my felt experience. It's going to shape my attitudes, how I interact with the world. But the beautiful thing about attachment theory and compassion focused therapy is that we can change that. We don't have to live in that perceptual lens, but first we have to become aware of that perceptual lens. So if I'm looking through life and I'm not noticing, I'm not identifying what's going on, I don't want to say I'm doomed to repeat it, but I'm doomed to repeat it. The pattern is so strong. And this is what the attachment theorists first began to say: the past will intrude in your present. This is what Buddhist teachings are all about. How do I live in this present moment instead of being intruded on? So I have to become first aware of it. I was just reading in one of the, in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, is again saying that same thing. Ignorance is the greatest problem of all the kleshas, of all the difficulties we go through, because if I'm not aware, I'm going to struggle. So mindfulness is really like, oh, here I am. This is part of the pattern. This depression, this upset. Somebody in that Facebook group that of our community said, this part of me just doesn't say anything. And, you know, the group and myself, we talked about that not saying anything is part of the pattern. That's something undigested, some emotional memory arising. We can open that space. It's like, maybe that's what's happening. Maybe some part of you never, or lived in this world of never being heard, never having words. So beginning to say like, wow, maybe that's what it was like. And then being able to say, if it's this bad now, What was it like back then when I didn't have any capacity? So that level of mindfulness, okay, so now you know, okay, here's this pattern. Now, when I don't know what to say, how can I use concentration practices to be like, what might I do here? Maybe I need to bring some compassion to this poor being, to me right now, when I'm lost or disconnected. How can I bring compassion in? And then we have all the practices. So how do we bring that in? So those are the interweaving. And back in the day, I mean, meditation retreats now have changed a lot, with awareness around trauma and the complication. But back in the day, when I was doing a lot of retreats, it was, if you're doing a mindfulness retreat for 10 days or a month or 3 months, you just stay with mindfulness. You don't practice anything else. But we became more aware. No, stuff comes up, and then I'm going to have to skillfully try a different practice, because I need to be able to be with whatever comes up. So when that stuff comes up, how can I bring compassion? How can I bring equanimity? How can I bring a sense of solace to myself?
When we are unaware or in a kind of an autopilot or something, we just default to old patterns, and probably that makes complete sense in certain evolutionary terms, I suppose. In some ways, it's probably is safer or deals with threat in a way to default to those patterns that have perhaps worked before, but we start to repeat that and so on. And so being able to use mindfulness to become aware of all of that and perhaps step out of the autopilot, and then it's about intention. And that notion, I suppose, of Paul's that we were chatting a little bit about before we started this conversation, but the stepping into the motivation around compassion, the motivation to sort of be helpful rather than harmful, and what to kind of do next.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is where attachment theory really helped me. So Bowlby and James Robertson, his colleague, studied what happened to kids in separation distress. And they had these 3 phases of separation distress: protest, despair, and detachment. And so I started thinking about all our upsets as protest. And really, if you think about it, and what was stunning to me when I figured it out is, if I'm upset at something, what does my body say to me? My body is really saying, it shouldn't be like this. Something deep inside of me, native to me, knows this is not right. But how did I learn that? What in here is saying that's not right? I actually want something else. I was like, I don't know what that is, but I love that. If my body is saying you are mistreating me, or stubbing my toe hurts, what is my body saying? My body's saying my body should be at ease. My toe shouldn't be hurt. Some mechanism is at play. What is that? And how do I orient to that instead of the protest? So when I started naming all distress as protest, my clients and my groups would be like, oh, right. Okay, now I can name it as protest. Now might I be able to look and see, well, what else might I want?
It's actually a clue to the intrinsic wisdom that's there.
Yes.
In the body. The body knows, kind of thing,
right?
What's happening and what is sort of right or not right, and physical pain is one sort of version of that, but there's an emotional other body-based sort of process as well, which understands that this isn't right. It shouldn't be happening like this.
It isn't, which circles for me back around to the ancient wisdom traditions, the mystical traditions that say there's some deep wisdom inside us that took on this birth for us to grow, develop, and flourish. Call it soul, call it spirit, call it Jesus, Krishna, Muhammad, whoever it is that is right for you. Something is activated. But how do I get back to that? How do I not just say this protest is wrong, but there's some deep wisdom that's arising that's wanting me to have something different. Now, chronic pain is something that people deal with a lot, certainly in my groups. And it's like, okay, so you're in chronic pain, but who do you want to be given that you have chronic pain? Because life is going to keep throwing us a few curveballs. So who do I want to be with that curveball?
And then there's I think the next bit is the third skill, which is that internal informational flow, which really starts to, kind of explore this
Right.
part, the thoughts, the feelings, the physical sensations, and there's all sorts of insights, I'm guessing, that can come from really kind of understanding that informational flow.
And taking apart something and putting it together in a way that feels better. So one of the examples I use is excitement and anxiety. When you pull them apart, the cognitive structure of them are different, but the felt experience, many of them are the same tiny bits of sensation. So how do if I study myself, can I then say, oh, my heart's beating fast? Is that anxious or is that excitement? And then it gives me a choice point to say, oh, all right, this may not be that bad of experience. On a gross level, people say, well, I want to be loved. Okay, well, let's take apart that construct of love, which you may have a lot of negative associations and storylines to, so that you can have love in a positive way. It's like my client who men are perpetrators or Obama's a good guy. Which direction do you want to be in? How do you encode that and literally train your body to have a different experience than the one that you were originally imprinted with?
I suddenly had a thought. I'm not sure what this means, but I want to be loved. Loved can be explored, and but so can I and want, and sort of in a way, it's interesting, want and need, or that there's sort of interesting things to unpack there, and what does that mean in terms of and so on. So that it's sort of, it's trying to really explore all of that, and to bring that kind of awareness and understanding, I guess, to the informational flow, and what that kind of tells us about the wisdom.
Exactly.
And then skill 4 is the separating fact from feeling. That comes right in next. Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, I want to acknowledge Yvonne Agazarian, who years ago did system-centered therapy. She's passed now, but it was such a powerful training for me that I did for years. And she uses it differently, but it got me thinking about it. How do you separate the facts from the feelings that are going on? And realizing that we interweave our facts so much. And if we think about it in Buddhism, in meditation practice, this is what we do. Bare noticing. I'm talking. That's all that's happening. But for many of the people I work with, including my own mind and body and heart, is when I'm activated because all these things happened and I'm spinning out around it and I'm rattled by it. But what's happening is maybe I'm talking, or I'm sitting, or I'm walking. And when the person can actually go from blah, 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 blah to this simple thing, I'm here, their body will calm and give them access to more information. I had this experience once. Somebody was in my Becoming Safely Embodied Skills course and wrote me some emails. And I was in a training, so I wasn't able to watch them, but there were like 10 emails of multiple pages without any punctuation, without any paragraph. I was like, when you try to read it, it's like nothing. And so I remember just like, what am I going to do? And then I went back into the course. And when I came out, so this would have been a couple hours later, this person was saying, oh, now I get what happened, period. I was angry at my blah because blah, and there was a coherence to it. And basically she said all she did was look at what the facts were. The facts were she was having a reaction to whatever had happened, and she broke it down for herself. And I have to say, I was stunned, like that level of internal organization that could happen so easily once somebody disentangled themselves from the storyline. So it's a powerful, powerful practice and skill that we can gamify and say, well, I know how to do it. But when we can really do it in practice, like what I have people do is circle the facts and underline the feelings. It's like, and just repeat just that, the body will calm. Or if somebody is disconnected from their feelings, they'll actually it begins to have some safety to have the feelings. And then you can work with it.
That's interesting. Some people are sort of experiencing a lot of feelings and have to kind of explore for the facts. Other people, because of their own shaped by experience journey, I guess, in their life, might be just very focused on facts and actually have to, sort of explore it for the feelings.
Right. It's the attachment pattern there is I'm, distancing from it. Okay, so if I'm distancing, what is it I'm not wanting to feel? So if I actually say, okay, so the facts are, I can have a feeling because the feelings aren't threatening anymore. They become a little bit safer.
And I can see too, but by the time where it's at sort of skill 4 and separating facts from feeling, we're bringing along, all the previous skills too. The mindfulness is in there, and the concentration, but also that sense of belonging and cultivating safeness, and that all sort of comes into this process of separating fact from feeling. And then there's parallel lives. Now, you mentioned that a little bit earlier, that this skill 5. It's really starting to sort of become aware of the life in the here and now, but then these other elements from the past and so on that might actually be kind of present in the now too.
Right. Well, and that's Mary Main's famous phrase, the past is always intruding in the present. And for people who have a lot of trauma history, that past present boundary is very diffuse. So how do you separate that out? How do you be in this moment, in this experience, without being always activated or flooded or even pinged by the past? And when people, it's so amazing. I'm thinking of one person in particular who I was working with her, and I literally in a session will draw that. I'll draw a line on the paper and I'll say, so you're here, this is whatever year it is, and this is the past. And you can see their eye like trying, because they're time traveling inside, really. They're caught in the emotional response. They have to bring themselves into this moment, like where it's safe. Right now in this moment, the fact is you and I are here in the office. In this moment, is anything bad happening? No. So it's a felt experience. Oh, it's a time capsule. Naming it that way helps them to see, oh, that's what it is. It's an emotional experience. It's a time capsule of experience. It's not this moment. Helps people just begin to soften a little bit. To go a little off tangent, that's where I think shame is an attachment wound. Somehow I needed something, didn't get that need met. And in fact, somebody rolled their eyes or said something to me or something. And I thought there's something wrong with me. So there's the shame. But the shame is because I didn't have those normal, natural needs met. Like your client, the normal need of any one of us is to be told as a child, but also as an adult, that we're beautiful, wonder, special, cherished, best, the most unique and wonderful person in the world. If we didn't get that, or if somehow it was so imprinted in us, there's something wrong with us, it's brutal. But that can be repaired in these simple ways of owning, like, of course I need to feel special. Of course I need that. Normal. We all need that. Or I need to be beautiful. Of course. Everybody needs to know that. Everybody needs to know they're special, they're wanted, they're guided, they're mentored, they're reassured. How do you get soothed? How do you know you belong, even if you're ugly? Like ugly is beautiful. If you think about it, that's what some of the fringe groups are. They're about owning, this is my uniqueness, and I can belong to a unique group. And how beautiful how necessary.
Such an important part of, yes, really honoring and valuing diversity and so on is part of that. But yeah, certainly the relational trauma or the shame or other trauma, it just kind of gets re-experienced in that moment as a parallel kind of life. And then, of course, yes, skill 6 is sort of dear to my heart in a way, working with parts. I mean, I can certainly see some of the parallels there with CFT and so on. But yeah, that's when we start to get into the conversation almost, I suppose, or work with these different parts or selves.
Yes, exactly. And there's so many great, CFT is a great method of working with parts. Internal family systems is a great, way of working with parts. It's really about how do I take this internal experience, externalize it in some way so that I can engage and help rework it. So that I realize I'm living in this present moment and I'm affected by the imprinting of my past, and how do I integrate it so that I can choose who I want to be in this lifetime.
I think Paul sometimes says, doesn't he, differentiation, integration and transformation, something along those lines is the sort of what we're working towards there.
Right. In fact, sometimes with trauma, we talk about the same thing is you need to be able, the differentiation, I need to say, it's not just me having this, whatever, it's differentiated, take it outside so that I can integrate it. There's creative dissociation. Like if I'm overwhelmed by experience, I need to be able to say, okay, creatively right now, I'm going to dissociate. I'm going to actively, consciously dissociate so that I can then integrate it back in when I want to or how I want to.
And the transformation piece comes also into the sort of skill 7, carving out a new path. I guess that's where we start to really, sort of move in a direction, carve out a new path, sort of have a fresh start, maybe those sorts of things.
Yes. How can I choose who I want to be? You said something mean to me. Am I going to explode at you, or am I going to pause and say, who do I want to be? I want to have a different experience. And that's when life starts getting better, right? It's because I am not being at the whim of what happens internally or externally. I then can say, this is where I want to go. This is the life I want to have for myself. And
you said sort of early on that the sort of our natural spirit flows us towards growth and flourishing, and that sometimes if we can work through those earlier stages of becoming safely embodied, then in some ways that just frees almost a natural inclination to go in that way and to find a positive path.
Right.
And then, telling and retelling and finding guidance from your older, wiser self. Those are the last 2 of the skills. Any thoughts or comments there with those last couple?
Well, I think I want to pay tribute to Michael White of narrative therapy for that. I remember sitting in workshops with him, and I could still cry about them. And he would tell these moving stories of working with schizophrenics as they told and retold a story in there. It was so profound for me that I thought if somebody with that much internal disorganization can change their story and have a different life, we can all do that, And so how, if this lousy thing has happened to me, how do I take that lousy story and say, like, this is the growth foundation for me, or how do I change it so that I actually have a better life for myself? And so that was just because I was so affected and moved by his work and the work that they were doing. And And because it can make it more fun, like if I'm saying, oh, I'm a victim and this bad thing happened. So what if I take a different perspective? Like sometimes I would think, like, what if your fairy godmother says it? Or what if a fly on the wall is saying, watching this, and or or the future self is the same thing. Who are you going to be? And that all goes to the peak performance work, which is so profound as well, is that we can literally train ourselves to have a different experience. If all the great tennis pros certainly talk about it, is how much they train their body in their mind to do it. Tom Brady, the great football player, talks so much about, the mental training that goes on. And so that was just a fun way to bring in some of these other research-based things, and for people in groups or in therapy to have fun, to lighten the load rather than and to have deep connections with themselves.
Yes, and very, sort of powerful stuff, because it is kind of re-scripting a narrative in a way. It's really working with the story, the narrative that's in our minds, and not necessarily feeling like it has to always be that way, but that
Right.
we can create and recreate, and in fact we might even recreate again, down the track. And I love that idea of the older, wiser self. I'm starting to feel like I'm arriving there.
You are an incredible.
Oh,
Older.
I mainly meant the older bit.
Well, I can totally 1,000% relate to that. But you're like, I think I'm going to have people watch you just to take in the experience of a good person who's attentive and care. Look at this. Don't blush now, Stan. And just to receive in this icon of what's possible.
Yeah.
It's okay. I love you to pieces.
Yes, the feeling is mutual. But so I will let you go in a moment, but I suppose one of the things that I've kind of had fun just asking people along the way is kind of like for their 3 tips to sort of see, kind of, I mean, there's so many tips there, I realize, but like what might you say are kind of like 3 tips that you might offer someone who was sort of on their way, on their compassionate journey?
Well, there's a practice that I came up with for myself years ago when I was trying to reorganize myself, and which people have used. And it really comes from attachment theory as well. So if you think about kids, what a kid is doing is that their being is moving out towards something. But so many of us get stuck around reaching towards something. And I certainly was too. So when I want something different, when I want to change a pattern in me, am I able to reach for what I want, then open to it, and then practice receiving the goodness of it? So the practice is this: being inside my body and like, what's it like to reach for it and see where I'm inhibited in reaching. Can I reach for it? Like, and if I put my mind toward, okay, I want more goodness, I want more compassion. Can I reach for compassion? And I'll watch where my mind says no, but how can I just pause and open to it, keep reaching for it? Then what's it like to live in a world where I can open to it freely, where it's safe to open to, and especially for women with our breasts exposed, this is often where we contract. How can I open myself? And then more than that, am I willing to gather it up like a full harvest and just
and it's straight to the kind of the embodiment, bringing it back to the body, sort of incorporating that. It's all very well to sort of ponder these things, but actually to bring the body in, and to have that sort of, as part of the whole thing. Wonderful, Deirdre, thank you very much. If people were wanting to sort of engage with you or be in touch or with you or your work, what could they do to get involved?
Well, probably a simple way is we have a safe guide. It's like a 40-page PDF. That's it's beautiful, if I do say so myself. And they could just go to dfay.com/safe guide.
Okay.
And download it. And that gets them on our email list and be part of. I try to do a lot of Facebook Lives. I try to do a lot of free stuff, as well as the books and other things. But whatever I can to help people, I'm glad to do. And thank you so much for your service, Mr. Stan.
Oh.
Doing this. I remember being with you at the CFT retreat and saying, you've got to start doing some podcasts and videos. You're amazing.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. Well, actually, to be honest, I deeply appreciate you and your work as well. I'm sure people will, kind of connect with you in that way. I'll include the website in the description below this video, and also perhaps a couple of other ways to find your books and other resources. But thank you, Deirdre Fay, very much for this wonderful conversation on compassion in a t-shirt.